Hello, my name is Mike Siebold. I'm managing partner at FlowerHire, one of the largest and longest standing HR and recruitment advisory firms in the cannabis space. Today, I'm being joined by the Executive Director of the US Cannabis Council, Edward Conklin, as well as the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs, David Culver. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
Great to be
having
with
us.
you. Thank you.
So for the folks out in TV land, let's start with an introduction to the USCC. The historical context, the mandate. I think a lot of people are curious about the backdrop of the cannabis space, but more importantly, groups like yours and what you're doing to push the agenda.
Absolutely. I'll take a stab at that first. But Mike, I noticed on the screen also my name is incorrect. I've got your name in my picture, so I don't know if that matters to the viewers, but
I mean, in this day and AI gets handsome, very confused, so it's okay.
So we back a while ago when I came into the industry, there was a bunch of different trade groups, and I got in the industry about 7 years ago, and there's all these disparate trade groups out there doing different things, and I was with Curaleaf. We belong to Cannabis Trade Federation, and there are others out there. But one of the things that, from my background, where I came to, is we wanted unity. We wanted to have a larger voice, get people around the same table, have good discussions. And David was a different trade group. Other people had different trade groups, and we called for unity, and that's how USCC came about. So the origins were many coming together as one to raise our voice to a higher level and get better thought around a table.
Dave, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it was a really important moment for the industry, Mike. All of us looked around the room and saw a bunch of different smaller groups that were there, and we realized that given what we expected to happen in the 2020 elections, and it turns out we were right, that there was the opportunity for really significant progress on cannabis reform, and as a result, we knew we needed to unify. And you can go back and look at countless numbers of industries who were at a pivotal moment in their journey as an industry, and they all realized that the need for unity was important. So that's what we did. We launched USCC in 2021, and I think that we have really established ourselves as the leading trade group in Washington on a number of fronts, both media relations, policy, and of course politics, which is a big part of what we do in Washington. And I would just say too that to those that are listening to this, if you are interested in engaging politically, now's the time to do it. There has never been a better time to engage politically than now. And reach out to Ed, reach out to me, go to uscc.org and contact us, because we really do need all the help that we're going to get, that we can get at this really important moment.
Thank you for giving us an overview. I think it's interesting because a lot of people, individuals, companies that are viewing this, they're kind of always curious, not about the commercial ramifications, right? Creating jobs, bringing operations, manufacturing, production, cultivation, just giving access to opportunity in far-flung parts of the United States that haven't had them in quite some time. I think there's always a curiosity about the political spectrum. There's always a curiosity about, do we have political clout whatsoever, or are we a bargaining chip that's utilized and repurposed? And I think oftentimes it's frustrating to know that what we have and what we've created and what we continue to build has huge ramifications for people's lifestyles. For the medical implications are vast and extreme. We also know specifically that we are in the midst of change consistently and constantly, not just because it is an election year, but since your inception in 2021, every year subsequent, we have had new marketplace development. We've had new iterative processes that create a new paradigm, specifically, which we can touch upon with rescheduling. I think it's interesting that we have been trying to have this conversation for weeks, and thank you again for your patience. The commentary period for rescheduling just concluded. I think it was about 42,000 comments were submitted. And the vast majority, and this was all via headset, about almost 60% of the comments supported the complete removal of cannabis from federal scheduling. So not just rescheduling, but descheduling entirely, and about a third was supportive of rescheduling. What is the sentiment up on the Hill in DC as it pertains to not just the commentary period? And does public commentary like that actually push and change and reflect and influence the decision-making process in DC?
I think, David, let's just do a kind of a back and forth here. I think it's the 42,000 comments sends a big signal, especially with 93% of them being proactive or positive on rescheduling, sends a monstrous signal to the Hill. And I think it shows an amazing output of work from just an eclectic group of folks out there. I mean, these comments came in from all corners of the country, from small to large, and some very thoughtful comments from a lot of different people. And does it make a difference? Absolutely. And just to go back on the political side a little bit, everybody's got a voice. And if you use that voice and you create momentum, and that's what we need. And we need to have momentum in this industry. We have a lot of education to do on the Hill. From my viewpoint and from my eyes, I think 42,000 comments not only will help get us to Schedule 3, but I think it also helps us on the Hill. David, I don't know what your thinks, but I think it's going to also ultimately help us on the Hill.
Yeah, I'll add to that because I think that those are very good comments, and I agree with every one of them. Um, I don't necessarily know that those on the Hill are paying very close attention to the public comment period and the numbers that were actually submitted. But as Ed said, 42,000 plus is very significant. Oftentimes these public comment periods do change the situation. I don't think this is going to. I think that we have enough in favor of what HHS and DOJ have recommended that it's actually going to remain where it will remain the final decision as a move down to Schedule 3. But in terms of the Hill, there is a small pocket on the negative side that have really been pushing a prohibitionist agenda. They have tried to put a spotlight on the process that HHS followed, the scientific process, and specifically the fact that they did a two-factor review. This has been discussed in the media at length. HHS has explained why they did this. This is basically a modernized approach. This is not just something that they would use in the cannabis space, but in any scientific review. So I think the arguments that you're hearing, and that's just one of them. There are some others, of course, from the small group of prohibitionists on the Hill, but they're making a little bit of noise inside the media, particularly the industry media sources. But more importantly, I think we need to be thinking about what is this going to mean on Capitol Hill if it ends up on Schedule 3. And to me, it's I think going to help soften the position considerably for Republican lawmakers here in Washington. And I can't tell you how many of them I sit down with who say to me, thank you for coming in, but I am not going to work with you on a cannabis reform issue when cannabis is sitting next to heroin on Schedule 1. I'm not comfortable doing it. But if cannabis is sitting next to Tylenol with codeine, then you should come back and see me. We can have a different conversation. So I think that's the softening of the position that we're going to see. And we're also going to see more and more state data come in, which is going to help further prove the scientific point that HHS has already made.
And you're right about the opposition. I think it's Smart Approaches to Marijuana, SAM is the acronym. They were actually part of the process of mobilizing, which, a lot of the commentary, the 8% give or take, that actually came back, that was anti-change and keeping cannabis exactly where it is for the most part in terms of Schedule 1 process. They did make it seem like a contemporary process that was dual, was kind of capricious. They made it seem as if that this was an expedited process and that the commentary period was conflicted. When in truth, I think the Biden administration was very transparent about the fact that they wanted to make this change, and that commentary and lawmakers up on the Hill, to your point, there's always going to be an apprehension because of where it sits, but we are in this instance where it's about to change. I think the other important component that's also worth illustrating and emphasizing is that, since 2021, since USCC actually was founded, subsequently, we've actually seen marketplaces in the Southeast. We've seen cannabis actually take root in constituencies alongside lawmakers that are not just apprehensive, but they have a disregard for cannabis entirely. Now you're starting to see the first instances of jobs. You're starting to see the first instances of businesses be created side by side with traditional businesses in these communities. So no matter what, we're seeing a progressive change because the landscape itself, where cannabis goes, not just in dialogue, but in how it's being built and where it's being built and how it's servicing a number of different people domestically. No matter what, there's a momentum there. I understand that politicians have an apprehension about supporting something that has had decades of service announcements denouncing it and calling it a blight. But at the same time, it's not a coincidence when you see this much commentary and these many people talk about not just rescheduling, but descheduling. That has to play into some consideration process. And it also, more importantly, I think the other thing that's also challenging about a lot of people's position in cannabis is political clout and lobbying efforts. You do need to have resources. And the cannabis space currently has lack of resource. So I'm kind of curious, do you think that the conversations that the USCC have had up on the Hill and with lawmakers, if there was an instance, if this industry was not burdened by 280E as an example, where we can't write off our operating expenses, if there was cash and there was the ability to have financial durability, do you think this conversation would have a different complexion?
Let me
Yes.
let Ed answer that one. And before we get back to that, I do want to just make a couple quick comments to the points you made at the outset of your commentary, which is that first of all, we rarely say that organization's name out loud, but I will go ahead and acknowledge Project Sam and the work that they are doing on their prohibitionist agenda, which is both wrong and often without any sort of fact or grounds. In terms of the HHS review, Mike, I wonder if they've actually read the document. It's 252 pages. It is a very thorough scientific review. If you look at some of the comments that were submitted from the scientific community, they are very, very much in line with what HHS has recommended here, based on the science that they have at hand. And also, the last time we went through this discussion, we did not have the extent of the state level data that we have now. So what they're pushing there is not factual and it's wrong. And I happily have the leadership of Project SAM sitting here with me and having this discussion again. The other thing that's important to mention to your audience is that both HHS and DOJ knew from the outset that they were most likely going to get sued post final rule, which they probably will. But they knew that they had to follow the intent to the letter of the law. And they both did. This has been a squeaky clean and closed process. And I think that both agencies have done a really good job making sure that they've insulated themselves against any sort of legal challenge related to the process. So with that, let me pass the mic to Ed to talk a little bit about the funding that the industry currently enjoys and what we could do with more.
Yeah. But I also think it's important on the whole process that HHS is using and DEA and the DOJ. It's been very transparent. So as a political operative for a majority of my life, this has been a very transparent, open process. You can't say it's been closed. There's people that are running around saying it's behind the scenes, things are being done. It hasn't been, and you got the Attorney General signing off on it. So I think there's been a lot of great work done by the industry, and it all builds momentum. And I think, we're the little engine that could, right? So right now we have a super high tax rate, the highest that you can possibly get. Our member companies are 80% tax rate to 85%. Our little member companies, we have single store operators who are minority owned, that run dispensaries. They're struggling day in, day out to pay their bills. So to relieve them of that burden will help us all out. And we're doing a lot in DC and through the state capitals in the states with a very little small budget. But once again, as David said earlier, please come and join us. We need your help. We need your membership. We have all kinds of membership levels. But if we do have more funding, you'll see bigger, better things. I mean, you're going to see greater advocacy. You're going to see greater representation. We can help out our friends and family throughout the state capitals, expanding the reach of cannabis. I mean, right now, Mike, there's 38 states that are legalized. There's 21 with 24 now with adult use. The industry employs over 440,000 employees. It's the 78th largest industry in the United States. And it's growing by 10% a year. It's a great time to be in the cannabis industry, and we all should take pride in that. But to David's point in your earlier question, I think we're in a great position. I think I love where we're at, not only with the HHS and the DOJ and the DEA, but I also love where we're at on the Hill in DC and many state capitals. I mean, we're making progress. And if you broaden out even besides US, you got all kinds of countries. And to answer your question earlier, when you talk about the momentum that's going on there, I think it's, you get these great responses back to the request for information, the 40,000+ comments, and people are going to go through there and you're going to find all kinds of great stats. As David mentioned, it's the first time in history you ever got all the state data out, right? So that is a tremendous help. And that was done from the regulator group, and they brought some great information to the table. And you have doctors weighing in, you have trade groups weighing in, you had some great trade groups weighing in. We have a coalition made up of a lot of our members that are heading up the rescheduling coalition. They're doing a tremendous job over there, and they just do great work, and just a very impressive job at that. So to answer your question directly, when you get rid of an oppressive tax rate that is doing severe harm to a lot of great people in this industry, yes, you'll get more funding, and yes, you'll have better advocacy, because this does take money to run a trade group, and it takes money to provide true impact and to make an impression, because we have to do a lot of educating on the Hill, but we're making a lot of movement forward. We're doing a good job on the Hill.
I think Mike, the only thing I'll add to that is that coming from the alcohol space, where we did have a very, very robust budget, we did have all of the political bells and whistles that I came accustomed to, including ample lobbyists here federally in Washington, and plus in every single state. We also had an international program that coordinated between trade associations. So these are all things that we're starting to think about in terms of our short, medium, and long-term vision for the US Cannabis Council. And I really do feel like we can take a page out of some of these other industry trade association groups that establish themselves in federally, but also state capitals and internationally. And then the final thing I'll say is that money is important, but it's not the only thing that's of import here. And I would just stress that the industry unification on policy is just as important as the financial support. So oftentimes, well, again, back to my alcohol time, I would have a very, very well-funded campaign with all the right people, with all the right bells and whistles, with the right message, and by the way, the right thing, but I'd lose. And I lost because the industry was divided. And when you have a divided industry, politicians are typically not willing to weigh into it. So this is something that Ed and I both talk a lot about with our colleagues in the space. And there's a couple issues that we're working on right now that are very divisive, but they're not going to get solved until we find some sort of common sense solution together.
You know, you actually bring up an interesting point, which is not just representing the idea or the space itself, but also specific initiatives. You know, in establishing and trying to propel unity and a uniform approach to the political process, and in representing all voices, you know, because again, you know, this is not a uniform industry. It's almost more like a series of informal economies that you have to weave together to get them even not just on the same page, but with the same dialogue. What are some of the initiatives that USCC right now is focusing on and pushing in terms of political agenda?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Ed, you kick that one off, and I'll follow your lead. Now, please.
Go ahead, David.
Well, okay. So we have quite a few, and it's been a very interesting cycle, this 2023-2024 congressional cycle. But there has not been, unfortunately, the progress that we were hoping for. And I will also state at the outset that many of us felt in 2020, when the Democrats were dealt a winning hand across all aspects of Washington. So they won the White House, they won the Senate, and they won the House, albeit by small margins. And I think all of us thought that we're in the industry and the government relations space at the time, that that was the winning Congress for us. We were going to see significant reform. And unfortunately, they held everything cannabis related until October of 2022, when President Biden announced that he was initiating the rescheduling effort between HHS and DOJ. We failed to move the Safe Banking Act shortly thereafter in the lame duck period. And then, of course, we are in the really the final throes of this Congress until they get to the post-election period, which is known as the lame duck period. And I think during that time, there may be an opportunity for us to try to move cannabis reform. But there are really a few things that we're working on. Number one is the Safer Banking Act. So I think in layman's terms, this bill allows for state legal operators to have depository institutions and banks that choose to engage with the industry. So this has been a bill that's been rattling around for 10 years, and it's a public safety issue. That's how we framed it. It's bipartisan. And we need Congress to act on this so that we can take the cash out of the system altogether and avoid the robberies and the deaths that are going along with having a cash-only system. We also, in my opinion, have a national security issue as a result of this, because we're seeing so many cartel operators popping up in legal states that are using cannabis as a front to launder money. So this is a relatively new messaging that I've been talking about on Capitol Hill, but I do think it's true. And I think it's important that Congress recognizes it and is really another incentive for them to move this along. Obviously, the rescheduling issue, we talked about that already. We've been in partnership with the Scheduling Coalition, who, as Ed said, has done a fabulous job really shepherding this process through to where it is right now. And by the way, when I say the word closed in this process, I mean that in a positive way. I mean that, yes, we were engaging as an industry as we were directed to, but there was also no inappropriate influence as it relates to this. That process was followed to the letter of the law. And then the third is the intoxicating hemp issue, which is probably the hottest topic on Capitol Hill that we're working on right now. It's a very divisive issue, and we can get into that a little bit more if you'd like. And then I would just say that we have done a great job pushing cannabis reform through the appropriations process for many, many years. We're kind of one step forward, two steps back situation, but we've done everything from access for medical patients, access for veterans. We've even tried to include the Safe Banking Act in one of the appropriations packages this year. So we're doing a lot on that front too, and trying to use approaches to solve some of the cannabis reform issues. But right now, our eyes are on the lame duck period post-election to see if there's something that moves that we can hitch a ride on.
Ever anything to add?
No, I think David hit it all. I would just remind folks, and I always say this, my old industry, we used to always say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So, and I mean that when I talk to a lot of our member companies and a lot of our employees, USCC members represent about 55,000 employees, and we'll get phone calls. What can we do to help out? And everybody can help out. And David laid out very clearly what we're looking for. This is going to be a very important time for us in lame duck. So any of those viewers out there who don't think they can help out, they really can. Find out who your congressman is, call the office, ask them to support safer banking, ask them to support rescheduling. It's really not their issue on rescheduling, but safer banking truly is. Those phone calls mean so much, and you'll be surprised about the response you get. And those offices, they don't get a lot of phone calls. I mean, the momentum there from our industry, they don't receive a lot of phone calls. So if you know your congressman, you don't know your congressman, call your congressman, call your senator. We need your help, and call us and join.
I think it's remarkable, actually. You brought up an interesting statistic, which is, as part of the USCC, statistically, there's about 440 some odd, about 500,000 active employees inside the space, active workers. And currently, USCC, by estimates, you have about 1 out of every 10 people associating with the USCC, which is really remarkable. But it's interesting, David, you actually did bring up one topic that is really fascinating, because it's kind of disorienting and discombobulating. which is intoxicating hemp.
Mm.
I travel pretty extensively around the United States, working with a litany of different clients inside, the traditional, I guess you could say, cannabis space. And without fail, if I go to a gas station or a smoke shop, or more importantly, even if I'm just walking through New York City, besides seeing illicit versions of our products or even legal products that have illegally found themselves to these marketplaces that have no marketplace to speak of yet in full, I at the same time see a litany of intoxicating hemp products, and they are accessible and they are pervasive. They are being sold right now through social media channels. They do accept credit cards. They are drop shipping these cannabinoids domestically. And as far as I can tell, there's no quality control whatsoever. We actually, before we started speaking here, I actually was speaking to Edward about the fact that there was a cease and desist letter because of some of these intoxicating hemp-derived products being very alluring to children that were, they looked like Chips Ahoy, or they looked like Oreos. I'm kind of curious about the USCC's inside knowledge and stance as it pertains to intoxicating hemp, because as far as I can tell, people inside the space are confused about not what they wish to happen from an enforcement standpoint, but more importantly, they're kind of confused about how this came to be in the first place. They're kind of confused about drug policy in America permitting something that is so synonymous with our space being so pervasive. So please.
You want me to start, David?
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you, Mike. Great question. This is one of those things, and people call me up and I get yelled at and all these things from the hemp industry because our stance is for consumer safety. That's what our biggest single concern is. I mean, David and I lived through the vape crisis, and it's important to point out the vape crisis did not come from any regulated legal cannabis company. It came from the unregulated illicit side of that equation. And I'm worried about consumer safety. And you hear it time and time again, kids are getting their hands on these products. They're not tested. They're not verified. Now, some companies are. Some are really trying to do the right thing and do it well. But they are drop shipping it. You can get it online. You don't know what's in this thing. And that is Ed Conklin's concern. That is my concern. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. This product is an intoxicant. It's not for everyone. So USC stance is pretty clear. We want to see it regulated. We want to see it controlled. We want to see it tested. We want to see it verified. And that is our position. It was created by the 2018 Farm Bill. I think we all know that. I would challenge anybody to find a senator or congressman that said, yeah, I'm voting for this Farm Bill because I want to legalize THC. I don't think you're going to find it. You might find something out there, but there's not one out there. It was a loophole, as we call it in the industry. And people are, if you read the Farm Bill and what it says about the cannabinoids, I think you have to really stretch to get to where people are at today with THC from hemp derived. But I think the importance there is that we need to have consumer safety to have a trusted industry. And what you're seeing, I think, from the FDA and others is you got an industry out there that is drop shipping a product across state lines. You got, I live in South Carolina and we received a mailer at our house. I don't know how many people in South Carolina did, but it was a very nice mailer. It was about buying Farm Bill compliant THC, and it had all the products, and it was drop shipped in my mail. And it had a website on there. Kids could get it, whatever. I don't know about that, but I am worried about consumer safety. And I think the next question is, how does this end up? And I'll bat that over to David. He's got a better political side of this equation than I do.
Well, I think that sets the table perfectly. And the debate on the policy front is all over the place. So as a result of the fact that we have not had any sort of federal oversight post Farm Bill, as we thought we were going to, states have had to take up the hemp issue on their own, and they've had to establish hemp programs and rules for products that are derived from hemp. And then fast forward, of course, to the last couple of years, and we have seen these products that are intoxicating, that are hemp derived, popping up in gas stations and bodegas and other places all over the place that are easily accessed by youth. And this is not only happening online, but it's happening in every community across the US. It's been an issue that the attorneys general have raised on Capitol Hill for years now. They're seeing products that are that look like Skittles and Doritos and Oreos, you mentioned, things that are very appealing to kids that are on the lower rungs of these shelves that they can grab. And there have been instances of where parents have taken these products and given them to their kids without knowing. That's a big problem. So I think the issue is something that is recognized, and really, to Ed's point, we want to make sure that we are responsible actors in this. And what's going to happen policy-wise is it's going to boil down to, do we try to close this loophole that Ed mentioned from the 2018 Farm Bill, or do we try to regulate everything that's hemp-derived through a federal agency? And of course, if that's the case, then the question arises, if you're regulating hemp-derived THC, which is the same as THC that's in a legal state, why wouldn't you just regulate it all and establish a regulatory system, take cannabis off schedule, regulate it all? So that's really what the crux of the debate is going to be. And then I'm going to go back to the point I made earlier, which is that not only are we divided as an industry about how to deal with this, but more importantly, we have Congress divided, and not just Democrats and Republicans. We have House Republicans just in the last couple of weeks that have been at each other's throats on this with very, very strong opinions in conflict with one another. So the parties are conflicted on this. And of course, the industry is too. And as a result of that, I think federally, it's going to be difficult for us to make progress until the industry can find a lowest common denominator that works for everyone.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned the idea of there being division, but there's also influence. I mean, the interesting thing about my experience seeing, the hemp industry grow, not like, slowly, but really dramatically. I mean, it's been very acute. I would say the last 18 months, we have seen some of these businesses have grown and ballooned in size and scope that are pretty extreme. And we've also seen it is also their own uh, processes by virtue of lobbying efforts as well. With Amendment 3, as an example, in Florida with DeSantis, he actually was a recipient of quite a bit of money from the hemp industry to squash Amendment 3, which would effectively create an adult use paradigm for the Florida marketplace, which needs a 60% majority in order for it to pass. And so not only do we have an industry that is, in a sense, living in a future we should have access to, except it doesn't have safety standards, they also are actually creating their own influence up on the Hill. They're actually lobbying and advocating for their own sense of freedom to keep this marketplace open, and not just open, but flourish. And I'm kind of curious in terms of your experience respectively on the Hill. Do you interact with people from the various hemp-derived groups and special interest groups? And are they influencing policy more than we think?
Yes, I interact with them on a very regular basis. I can probably sit here and rattle off almost all of them that are working on this issue. Their influence has absolutely grown on Capitol Hill over the last couple years, largely because their businesses are doing really, really well. And it's obvious why they're doing so well. And I want to make sure that I'm very clear about some of the operators in the space, because Ed said this perfectly early on. There are some really good actors that are in the hemp-derived space. They are testing, they are age gating, they are making sure that their products are not adulterated, et cetera, et cetera. So they're doing the things that all of us would like to see. Problem is, there's a lot of other bad actors that are out there that are taking advantage of the situation and not age gating and not testing, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where our concern comes in. But their influence has grown significantly on Capitol Hill. I'm seeing it day in and day out. And this is also part of the reason why, you're starting to see more and more division within those that are in power in Congress. And let's pick on the House of Representatives. The Republicans that just on the House Agriculture Committee and on the House Rules Committee, they are divided on this issue. And they're going to remain divided on this, again, until there's some sort of consensus pathway forward about how we regulate this in a responsible way.
It's fascinating to think about something that's divisive in several ways. I think it's also interesting to see firsthand what an industry like ours is trying to do in an appropriate way with with extreme regulation, safety standard protocol, and what happens when that doesn't exist, but also the fact that there's inaction in both instances. So with that being said, I'm kind of curious, now that we are at the conclusion of the commentary period for rescheduling, and now that we are entering into, the last stages of this election cycle going into November, if you had to, and I know this is an unfair and a loaded question, but if you had to assign a timetable where you believe, even with opposition, being going to ultimately create a paradigm where there's going to be lawsuits and it's going to be a protracted effort to delay that change. I'm kind of curious about when you think we will live in a Schedule 3 world, from in terms of a timetable.
Wow.
It's a loaded question, I know.
Ed, you're the boss.
If I knew that
You keep
answer,
going
I'd be
on.
a real rich person. Yeah, I'd be, I'd tell you when to buy stock. And I always think it's a great time to buy stock in this industry. I think it's a great time to be an investor. And if you are watching, you got money, I'd invest it now because the future is very bright for this industry. I can't put a date and time on it. I would tell you that I am hopeful that it happens. Two things. A, I want it to happen before the end of this year for a lot of different reasons. And I think you are right. There'll be the lawsuits. Everybody should expect lawsuits. I mean, that's just part of the process. You got Sam who will do lawsuits. Other ones out there who will have lawsuits out there. I am hopeful that it happens, and that's my belief that it should happen by then. And but there's a lot of strange things that happen in this regulatory environment. I mean, nothing goes straight. Nothing goes easy with cannabis. There has been nothing easy about this industry since we started in. My old boss used to say that, every morning he wakes up, he knows he's going to get punched in the face, but he doesn't know where it's going to come from. And it's a great comment for this industry, because every morning we all get up, we get to work, we try to do our best, and we got a lot of things going on, but you get these surprises that pop up all the time, Mike. They just come up from random places. And I think the speculation on when it's going to happen, it can be somewhat dangerous, because then the media grabs hold of that and they say, well, everything's going to happen on this date. It doesn't happen. And then the markets go crazy and people call you different things. I know David's going to come on here and say, here's his over under. I don't know, David, but you got over under on what date you're projecting? What's your bet line now?
Yeah, I'm a little bit more bold in this discussion, and I have been since October of 2022. I've put the over under at October 1. And that's final rule. So this is not this whole thing being settled in the courts. That could drag on for a long time. But to your question specifically, when are we going to be living in a Schedule 3 world? We're living in it once we get final rule. And again, like, they're going to litigate, and we'll see how long that drags out. But as far as I'm concerned, that 280E tax relief begins when that final rule is issued. And I think companies are going to have to take a look at, with their own accounting team and their legal team, to see, is it something that can be backdated to the beginning of the year, or is it something that you can even do a 3-year look back with a new IRS reg, which leads me to my final point, which is that I think you're going to see some sort of guidance out of Treasury as it relates to 280E and when they can start to take it. But for me, October 1, I'm taking the over slightly on this. The politics dictate that this administration, and now the new nominee, is going to take cannabis and run with it, which I think she will. I know she will. And they need this to get done before the election in order for her to use it to help mobilize the youth vote and the pro-cannabis voter, which is significant. I also think that there's a real hope and a nervousness at the same time within the industry that they don't get it done before the end of this administration. Because if they don't, then if it is a Republican administration that wins, if it's former President Trump that wins, he could shelve this scheduling decision indefinitely. So there's no clock on the scheduling decision, and that's something that certainly all of us that are involved in this process are worried about. Much more so than the next administration restarting the discussion altogether.
I'm just glad, Mike, you didn't ask when we think legalization is going to happen at the federal level.
I think that's coming next, Ed.
Well, I think it's always an interesting conversation to have about. I mean, keep in mind this is one of the largest shifts in public policy for drug policy in a very long time, for considerable time, for half a
Right.
century. I think what's really interesting too is to realize that it's the first step of many. You know, what it does is it changes the way in which we appraise this substance and its use, and the way that we can provide for it from a regulatory standpoint in terms of creating pharmacological application, medical use, et cetera. It's also important to remember that a lot of the fundamentals do not change without supportive actions like safer banking, creating a paradigm where you get access to banking, where you can talk about and start creating a paradigm where there might be interstate commerce. Again, what it does is it changes the sentiment, but a lot of the fundamentals from a business perspective don't change. So it's one of many steps that we have to take. But I think you're right. I think it's really important for people that are watching this to realize that, come the election, and depending on which administration we have, there could be a significant delay.
I I just go back, Mike, to what you just said. If you combine safer banking and rescheduling, this industry, it is an inflection point. This industry from there on is a rocket ship, right? It is going to take off like you have never seen. And those two things combined really, really help small businesses in this industry, really help minority run businesses in this industry in the United States. And I couldn't be more excited about that. I mean, this is going to be the 1-2 punch of getting rid of the 280 tax and not getting banking for folks. I mean, right now, some companies have banking, but super high fees. You don't have, there's a lot of stuff that goes with that people have, but those two combined together are transformative for this whole industry. And that's why I tell people all the time, it is now time to get involved. It's now time to raise your hand, call folks, help support. If it was not USCC, support somebody, get involved in this game. But, let's go get this thing done. Let's get it done this year.
Yeah, and Mike, Ed is so spot on about the tipping point for this industry with rescheduling. This will be the moment that the industry turns the corner finally and starts to reach the financial goals that we expected, many of us, a number of years ago for them to reach. But one other factor that we haven't thought about or talked about yet is the Democratic presidential nominee, Kamala Harris. She also, if elected, is going to be able to take the cannabis reform ball that Joe Biden started rolling, and she's going to really be able to take it and do even more with it. She is the first presidential candidate that we've ever had that is 100% pro reform and pro legalization. And that's something that the industry has been celebrating for the last 10 plus days. But I really feel like that's another piece of this puzzle that over the next 4 months, really, and we're going to have the answers to. So I think 2024 is the year that I hope many of us can look back on and say that was the year that it all changed, and that was the year that the industry started to reach its potential.
For those of people who are at home watching this, students, et cetera, other industry leaders, businesses, emerging businesses, how can they get in contact with the USCC and start participating?
A couple of things. One is you can go to our website, uscc.org. On there is all our contact information. You can always email me at ed@uscc.org, or give me a call on my cell phone, 843-955-5997. Once again, it's 843-955-5997. And I'd love to have the conversation and help out.
Great. David?
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Reach out to us. We want to hear from you. We've got general information inboxes, which we monitor very closely. All of our contact information is on there. We can help guide you politically. We can help you understand what a membership would look like for you and your employees. But again, I wake up in the morning now, and I'm going to probably through the end of this year on pins and needles about this industry. And it's been like this for me for the last 5 years, but it's worse than ever now because I can feel not only the momentum shifting, but I know what I believe and I hope is going to happen both before and after the election. And all of these things are going to be that monumental shift that again allows this industry to reach the potential that we've always expected it to. So, please engage and do it now.
Edward, David, thank you for the time today. Wonderful conversation. And we'll make sure to post and provide all this information for anyone watching this so they have access. Thank you again. Take
Thank you,
care.
Mike.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.